check, and it allows you to also check if there's not some interpretation going on that might not be correct, or at least that is not aligned across multiple people. With that in mind as well, range observations. If you have a lot of observations, you can use shorthand. And if you do a lot of observations, try as close to when you observe them, write them down. So yeah, that's the question.
I'm not really sure if I could add as an observation, but the doctor that dropped that immediately went straight for the younger patient who's going for A&E, just dropped the patient file and just went straight for the young patient. I don't want to. Maybe I'm just being wrong by saying that, but shouldn't there be a doctor that is already assigned to that patient? That's what I'm
saying.
Because what I'm trying to say is it's an extra doctor for there's already one physician already attending for this patient, and just adding another extra patient doesn't make sense.
Right. So I would say write it down, and then you can come back to the clinic later, maybe after the shift. You can talk to someone and say, is this what it's supposed to be? Like, was somebody not assigned, or what happened here? And then you might ask that person, like, why did this happen? And they might tell you very interesting, things about what's happening at the clinic at the moment, problems that, your one observation now uncovers a whole, you might have an interview with them, and that uncovers a whole, whole new frontier of observations that lead to problems. So don't be discriminatory in the first, when you're doing observations. Trying to have an open mind, and don't second guess yourself. If you want to write something down, write it down as an observation. It's a witnessed event, and it doesn't have to be a problem. You can write things down that end up not being problems. So write it down and then deal with it later, is what I would say.
Yeah, so there are no wrong observations.
Right.
You can write anything down. It's absolutely fine. And then you can kind of, once you cluster it, you can go, oh, you know what? I don't think there's anything in this observation, which is fine. But sometimes it's the small things that would then trigger follow-on questions, which then kind of give insights. So the whole point of this is that through your observations, through your needs, you get insights that we would not think about. It's not in the literature. It's very often that the teams that kind of find these needs, they can't find anything in literature because nobody thought about this being a problem in the way it is stated.
Right.
Which is also sometimes a problem because you have less evidence at that point. But it is a good kind of example to highlight that you might be truly taking a different viewpoint, and therefore, for the long term, there might be different kind of evidence that you have to get.
Yeah, definitely. So we move from observation into problem and need. So this is where we're starting off now after the break. We're going to look at the need. We're going to take the observation that you decided you were going to bring in here from out there as your one observation for the team, and we're going to make a need statement out of it. So what is a need statement? Well, there are basically three components to a need statement. There's the problem, the population, and the outcome. And they all feed into the need statement, which reads, a way to address problem in population, that outcome. So if it sounds like gibberish right now, don't worry about it. We'll talk about this a lot more. You want to make sure that there's a strong link between the outcome and the problem. For example, there's a need to decrease the tobacco use among teenagers in order to prolong average life expectancy. So the problem is smoking, tobacco use among population, which are teenagers. So very good. And then we have a clear, measurable outcome, which is increased life expectancy. But what's the problem with this need statement that I just mentioned?
Teenagers cannot really buy it.
Right? What is another problem with the need statement itself? Sorry, can you speak up? Right. So reducing life expectancy, the link between reducing tobacco use and life expectancy, that link, life expectancy is extremely multifaceted, and teenage tobacco use is just a very small part of that. So that might not be the best outcome. So you want to make sure that what the problem and the outcome that you're putting into your need statement, that they're linked very strongly. And you also want to make sure, I talked about with this group out in the break, that you want to make sure that you have a good scope for your need. So you can be too specific, and you can be too niched. Or sorry, you can be too broad and you can be too niched. What I mean by that is, if you go to the trunk of the problem, here is for example, prevent atrial fibrillation. That's multifaceted. One branch of AF might be prevent clots from forming, and then a sub-branch of that branch would maybe be prevent clot from leaving the heart. Another example would be, the trunk being, prevent cancer, where one branch would be breast cancer, and then there are multiple branches that can branch out from that. So where do you go? Well, saying preventing cancer is very kind of, we all want to do that, but the issue is, are we going to be able to solve that need as a team with the resources that are available? Probably not. So it's probably better that we focus on a level of the need where we can actually make a valuable impact. And going too much into the kind of smaller branches might lead to, we are focusing on a need that's unnecessarily targeted, so we might actually be able to do more impact if we go a little bit broader, or it's so targeted and so niche that it doesn't really have much value. So you don't want to end up too trunky, too close to the trunk, and you don't want to end up too close to the leaves. And that's both a science and an art to know where you should place your need. But the thing is, it doesn't really have to be such a difficult thing, because you can have multiple needs that are kind of in different places of the tree that you can also work with as you're going along in the process. But trying to find that, at least being mindful of the fact that you can go too far in niching down, and you can go too far in being very broad. Knowing that those are two extremes that you don't want to be is good to know when you're scoping your need. One example here, I don't know if you can, you should probably be able to see it, is there are two need statements that are kind of similar. One is opening up a whole new solution landscape that the other one, the purple one, is not. So the purple one reads, a stent that prevents vessel wall material from embolizing. And we're not going to go into detail about these three, but there's a certain solution landscape that's available to that need statement. Changing it to say a way to prevent the consequence of emboli secondary to interventional procedure is broader. It opens up the solution space. It also includes everything in the purple box, but it includes more solutions. So being mindful of what are you excluding in terms of possible future development opportunities with your need statement is also important. So we're going to take an example of a team that I coached. So this is a real life example where they were at a maternity clinic and they were doing observations there. And in that maternity clinic, there was a breastfeeding clinic. And they said, so the need statement read, a way to support mothers with breastfeeding after they've left the hospital. And I want to ask you guys, what do you see as potential problems with this need statement?
Does it have to be after they left the hospital?
Does it, right? So what's the significance of after, right? You had a, there's no outcome, correct? Anything else? Yes?
The problem is not well defined.
The problem is not well defined. What do you mean by that?
So it says to support mothers with breastfeeding, but exactly what the problem they are facing is not.
Right. So the problem is not well defined either. Where support might mean, is it physical support we're talking about? Is it financial support? Is it emotional support? What kind of support are we talking about? And this is very easy for a team to say, you know, this team was very passionate about this need statement, and they were all aligned about what they meant with it, but they were not necessarily aligned with other people. So they knew exactly what they meant by support, but for me coming in fresh to this need statement, I don't know what they mean. So they need to be more specific. There was a hand here somewhere. No? So great points. So is the need clear? You want to eliminate ambiguity. What does support mean? You know, do the random person in the clinic test. If you ask, you know, 3 people randomly in a clinic, what does this mean? What does it tell you? Are they going to answer the same thing, or are they going to have different views of what you're trying to communicate with your need statement? Why is the need important? Yeah, we don't really know what the problem is here. What is the pain point and underlying triggers? Doesn't say anything about that. What is the desired changing outcome? Again, what are you trying to achieve as a better future if you were able to solve this need? So they said, no, it's not about financial support. It's not about physical support. It's emotional support, because the mothers come home after they've left the breastfeeding clinic and they're worried. So a way to relieve mothers' worries after they've related to breastfeeding after they've left the hospital. Okay, so if we're talking about solution landscape, now we're then talking about possible solutions is to medicate the mother or advise against breastfeeding. Because if the worry is the main pain point, then just pop a Xanax and you should be fine, right? So, or just, you know what, this whole breastfeeding business is just scary. You're going to be worried. Just don't do it. Don't breastfeed. And they're like, no, that's not it. So this is how your need statement communicates around the need that you're trying to solve. And this is why it's so important to get it right, at least to try to get it right, like the process of trying to pinpoint what you're actually trying to do. Because if random people in a clinic don't know what you're talking about, I'm sure that different people in your team might even have different ideas about what you're actually trying to say if you're keeping it vague. So if you're keeping it vague, everybody's happy because everybody thinks that we're working on a problem that I have in my head, but that's going to lead to conflicts because if we're not clear with our need statement, we might be working in different directions. So having a clear need statement is not just about communicating with the outside world, with your stakeholders and potential clinical partners or investors. It's also about communicating within your team and making sure you're all on the same page. So I asked them, what is your observed pain point? Let's take a step back then. If this is not working, what is your observed pain point? What did you actually see? And they said frustrated staff. I said, hold on, wait a minute. Your need statement is around a way to support mothers' worries around breastfeeding, and what you saw was frustrated staff. What's happening here? Well, they saw a report that the clinic did because the clinic was frustrated, staff was frustrated because a lot of the mothers came into the breastfeeding center because they were afraid that they had engorgement. And being afraid that they had engorgement, but only 30% came in and actually had engorgement. So 70% were false alarms. And the clinic staff was super stressed already, and they were frustrated that there were so many false alarms around this issue. Can't something be done to screen, a better screening tool for engorgement for these mothers? So how do you then take the leap from that to mothers' worries? Well, they're making assumptions. They haven't seen mothers' worries. They haven't been at home with the mother and interviewed them. But you're making assumptions about what you see, and you're changing the needs statement to fit your narrative instead of having it fit what you're actually seeing. So I worked with the team, and we came up with a better needs statement, which was a way to shorten time at breastfeeding centers spent on mothers wrongly thinking they have engorgement in order to reduce personnel stress. So can I have, this might not be this is one iteration of this need statement. No need statement is perfect. So do you have any idea or thoughts about this new need statement? Anything that pops out to you? Anything that you want to say? Yeah.
I guess you're already implying a solution by saying so shorten the time at the centre.
Uh-huh.
You've already sort of directing us towards a solution where maybe you need to keep it more general.
Okay. So I wouldn't, usually time isn't necessarily, because you can solve it in many different ways. But you're touching on a really important point. It's about time at the clinic that this is focusing on. And we're going to get back to that in just a minute. Yes, did you also have something?
Yeah, like the scope is quite narrow, so you probably have excluded other opportunities to add value to mothers because like you've encountered this one situation where they think they've got a specific condition, but there could also be, other ways in which, mothers wrongly think they have something.
Right.
Struggle. Yeah.
So is it too narrow? So these are great questions to ask. Where do we scope this? What are we focusing on? Great questions to ask. And it's never going to be finished. Your needs statement is going to be developed as you go along. But I want to touch back on the issue of shortened time. Instead of saying maybe, why not say, keep the mothers away from the clinic? Those, shouldn't the needs statement be around somehow keeping the mothers away that don't, that are false alarms, so that they don't have to come in at all? Shouldn't that be the end goal? Because then you're saving the mother from the trip, and you're kind of saving the system from this extra work. But the issue there is that the breastfeeding clinic is interested in having patients. So they get paid per patient, and this is back to what Jerome was talking about. Thinking about the incentives within the context that you're working in. There would not you would get the whole breastfeeding clinic and the kind of that sphere of clinics against you if you came up with a solution to keep them away from the clinic. So you need to think about, how does this fit in to the stakeholder map that we're working in? How does this fit into the context? And it's also the outcome here. They didn't have an outcome before, but this outcome is measurable. You can actually measure it, and there's a link between the time. Theoretically, at least, there's a link between shortening time, so freeing up time, still seeing the same amount of patients, just freeing up time so that you have less stress. And they make those measurements. So it's not perfect, but at least it's a highlight of not making assumptions, making sure that you're working within the kind of context and not trying to fight the context. And also being clear on the problem, the population, it's very segmented, and the outcome. So this is what I would like you to do for the next 20 minutes in your teams, to take the observation that you decided is your observation and make it into a need statement. And I will put this slide up for you first. And these are some of the common pitfalls. And so you said that there was maybe a solution already in the need statement. And there's actually so I don't know if are you familiar with, have you heard anything about Biodesign before today? You have. So then you know that one of the pitfalls of a need statement is that it's solution oriented. But let's start from the top. The need is too general. So again, back to the tree, it's too close to the trunk. It's to save the world. It's great to save the world, but can we focus on saving what the small part that we can actually make an impact and add value? That's much better than going too broad. The need is too specific. So if you're going too much into the branches, the need might not be kind of strong enough to support the value that you want to create or kind of the impact that you want to provide. The need is stuck in current practice. So instead of thinking about kind of what is the if the current practice is to do ABC, in a few years' time, maybe that's going to change. So instead of talking about exactly this, maybe this treatment or this process, think about it as what's the underlying problem that we're trying to solve, and that will then be more sustainable over time, regardless of what technology is being used in the operating theater, regardless of what processes they have when they work with in the recovery ward. You know, if you have it be technology agnostic, if you have it be kind of process agnostic to as much as possible, you will make sure that you are more able to be more sustainable over time and have it be more longer lived. The need has an embedded solution that, as we talked about, you might say there's a need to monitor XYZ. You know, then you've already said it's a monitoring tool of XYZ. So that's not a need. That's a spec for a solution. And then finally, need is built on a negative. So try to see what do we want to achieve instead of what do we want to avoid. So we want to have we want to get the patient out. Maybe we want to say in order to decrease the days that a patient spent in ICU. You know, that's more of a positive than we don't want them to stay in the ICU too long. You see the difference there? So think about what the positive impact that you want to do. I would also like to add another common pitfall. That's at least one of mine, which is and. So putting an and in your need statement. We want to really, get patients out the door quicker in order to save money and reduce personnel stress. Well, the issue with and, especially in the outcome, is that you can oftentimes, they're not necessarily, they're sometimes mutually exclusive. So sometimes you need to invest to put in a process to reduce personnel stress. Sometimes, so having both the cost element and another positive element in there might actually be work against you because they might be mutually exclusive. So think about that as well when you use and. I would use that be very cautious about using that. So again, 20 minutes to the top of the hour. Please work on your need statements. And I will put this slide up so that you have it as a reference as you're working. And so please write a need statement based on the observation that you decided you wanted to work on, and have it read something along the lines of a way to address problem in population that outcome. And make sure that the outcome is measurable, that it's precise. Measurable is a big thing because you want to make sure that whatever it is, you want to know when you've reached success. You want to know what success looks like. So take 20 minutes. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just very quickly on the outcome. So Daniel's example is very good where he was looking at life expectancy. You don't want to have that as an outcome for what you're doing because it takes very long to get the data. So if you think about an investor sitting across you and you say, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how we do it, can you present the data within a year or within kind of a clinical trial? If it's not, be very, very wary to put it up because it becomes very difficult to prove. So think about the outcomes as something you can accomplish and it is as simple as possible.
Great point. All right, so 20 minutes.
About life expectancy, for example, being a outcome. Yeah. And I just wanted to get your opinion on like preventative healthcare within that context.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm really, really interested in the topic, and for my course we have to produce a business idea at the end of the year. Yeah. And we've had debates with so many lecturers about it because of how the pharma industry is structured. Yeah. And it just seems such a low-hanging fruit, but no one will touch it with barge pole because it's just impossible to like. And there are studies that prove causal relationships with particular things as well. So I wanted to speak to you about it. Yeah, but that's
and prevention is deadly because the prevention is absolutely
ironically deadly.
Yeah, it is. It's deadly to work on from your own perspective because we our team we do a system of prevention technologies. The problem is it's a lot of compliance. So if I tell you don't do this now. We all know like exercising and healthy food. We should do that, but we don't do it because the length is different. So we do a lot of kind of rehab space. That kind of compliance for prevention is very tricky to kind of get right. So even with the studies that we do, where as I mentioned, the studies get quite well outcomes. People don't keep using it. So some of the studies say, okay, you can hold on to these systems. And they are preventing you to kind of later on solutions. So we do stuff with osteoarthritis, we do stuff with kind of heart disease. And then we do a follow-up later in the study. You see that they end up, just kind of by being used. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do. But think about what is it that you can create where it's also a need that is there beyond maybe the bubbles that we have. So if you do a study, don't kind of think about it, but think about, okay, what happens if I do this in real world perspective? So how would you kind of apply prevention? What is the need? Sometimes the triggers are this kind of sub benefit that would lead to prevention, but that sub benefit becomes a bigger problem of how people perceive it than the main benefit. So a lot of times within that space, sometimes you have a perceived problem, and that's fine. It's great. So I mean, there are social media companies that are just working on a perceived problem.
Well, the beauty industry is founded on it as well,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's it's from a commercial, from a sustainability point of view, it is a real thing. So the problem is sometimes we misunderstand the perceived problem with the real problem. You think, oh, there's a real problem. Yeah, it is, but people don't perceive it as a problem. So although that's a real problem, people don't respond to it. Well, the perceived problem, people go, they say, this isn't a problem. Yes, but the perceived problem is there. Therefore, you do get a response. So it's not kind of helping, but I think it's a good way, because we come around many times. We were solving a real need. we couldn't get compliance because our users didn't perceive it as a problem.
Yeah, well, that's also kind of, I guess, the kind of central facet of kind of solving something that there is already a need for, rather than creating something that people don't see a need for. Do you know what I mean?
There is a nuance there. So
It is a very nuanced area, right?
yeah. So one of the things we did very early on that I was involved in is kind of a company called Elfie. They do a pelvic floor muscle.
Yeah, I know it.
Perfect. So I kind of created the EP text for Elfie.
Oh, cool! How amazing!
But same problem, like very
Not good compliance.
Well, people didn't think it was a need, so the education had to come with it.
Yes.
So there's a lot of nuance on, for example, when Alfie was thinking about ready pushing, they were putting it in John Lewis because the salespeople from John Lewis couldn't explain it and they weren't putting it in the booths because so what they did a trial. So they said, oh, you want to make it, most of them wanted to have it at the beginning. Sales supply. But they kind of said, okay, so they went into the shops and they asked about, can you explain what it is? And they couldn't at Boots, but they could at John Lewis. And they go, okay, we'll go with John Lewis because the point here is you need to understand as well, you know, what problems they solve.
Yeah, that's a really good
So
point.
these are kind of the nuances where you have to kind of work around. So it was, once the need started to be established, yeah, now it's something that's going to be carried very obvious, and you know, there's a lot of competitors, and that's great. But as you're becoming the first to enter, you'll be very much aware that sometimes, and Elfos is a great way with promoting and kind of opening up the conversations.
Yeah.
Pelvic floor muscle training, and all those things that always bring, oh, you know, I talk about the vagina.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I was just going to put it up, but one of the things they did when they hired me, put it on, and if they had somebody who couldn't kind of talk about it, we don't want you in your team because you can't explain
Yeah, totally.
So you have a lot of those things that don't come together. So it can be done. So be very smart about what are the barriers, what is our strategy to
And what are the stakeholders? Because you have, especially in healthcare, you have different stakeholders. You have the buyer, the user, and the payer. So what are those?
Yeah, well, that's the kind of main issue that the overarching issue really that I've been running into with something like mental health, because especially, well, just everywhere really, globally, you need a buyer who's going to pay you. Like, that is...
Right.
And so when Alpha came on the market, we made the decision to first go to
Well, that's
consumers.
B2C, right? Yeah, so like...
Yeah, although we had come to Lewis and but only later became clinical. But that was also because we were promoting the prevention. So you can
Promoting the what?
the prevention. So the idea was to train before we had a problem versus where there was also need for people that had a problem to be trained on. So it can also think about rates, and of course prevention in terms of market size is way bigger. But yeah, again, it's how do you get in and how do you open up the conversation.
Yeah.
Even if you have an amazing solution with a real problem, think about what is it perceived. Is this the one?
No, it's off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what time are they coming back?
At the top of the hour, it's at 4, and then we have 20 minutes to discuss. Slot. It's a good group. It's very interesting because they all take the afternoon.
Places. And they got very good questions. They can proceed here. Yeah, nice. It's, so you're gonna go through all these hoops for the next 2 minutes?
We'll see how many we get to. Yeah.
I would just kind of throw them out, point them, because otherwise we can have next week. So sometimes it's good to just go, okay, let's start with the back half. Or if you think the bed is a bit different, you can start with the front, so they kind of are comfortable by the time you get there. But I would do that because then everybody has a benefit. Otherwise, it's also a bit, they kind of work on it, but they don't get feedback. Then they're like, oh, okay. So I think it's even if they don't want to, let's just work so all the groups, even if you don't know, okay, this way, which group was that?
No, I still say like just because I don't. I guess that's my only, which is totally irrational. But my only aversion was like I don't know. I can't see where the teeth are necessarily.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I'll do that anyway.
Yeah, you can kind of visualize it. Yeah, of course.
So I'm apart from like I specialize in sustainability.
Okay, yeah.
For starters, and particularly thinking for healthcare. In your opinion, do you think that sustainability is going to be even more and more important in healthcare startups and how to integrate this in their business?
Yeah.
And is it mainly that investors request sustainability? Obviously,
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we're not talking about sustainability from a business point of view, but from a financial point of view.
Yeah. This would be too. Yeah, there are different types of.
Yeah, very interesting. I'll be
So,
happy to relax and restore tonight, maybe with a book, and then. But then I'm super early. Yeah.
Are you going back to school?
Yeah. Tomorrow morning. Yeah. So the thing was
From London to your
Stansted. Yeah.
From Stansted, you go to Stansted,
Yeah.
right?
So that's very convenient, but it's also
It's nice. You have.
yeah. I need to grab a taxi, so I'll probably need to leave
I use it and then
5. So
What time is it?
that's the safest
the thing was that I also want to give it time just because of the strike. I know there's not supposed to be a strike tomorrow, but you never know. But
But take taxi. I mean, in the morning you take taxi. It's not so far. It's 30 minutes. I think that's the train. It's the closest one. Anyway, there is no bus to go train.
there isn't. There's no.
Early.
they ain't gonna. No, but if you know advice, you don't have to do
But it's, yeah, there are trains, but again, they have strikes today, so it's very, very tricky with the train.
Yeah.
For no advice, you don't do about it because you might be radiation.
So
And therefore, it's fine. So
you have to do this.
yeah, you have to do it. So don't worry about it. So
Last time when I came
there's
from
a lot of
Stansted, they opened the train
which needs to be
cancel.
from a rescue point of view.
So I had to take a bus, wait in the airport for hours. It was okay when you are here, but when you have to go home, that's not okay to get this. So imagine now, it's these people strike, get today against strike day.
Yeah.
Especially, I guess,
Especially like at 5 a.m.
might be much more important than, like, give us the solution, even if it's maybe not the most sustainable one, that's fine. So, like, the solution.
Absolutely. Well, if you then look at other partners, there are some governmental, legal.
The pitfalls.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yes, I can put it up so everybody.
Oh, sure.
even
Yeah.
if
Thanks.
I don't want to, it's now required by the government to deal with that in a way, and then it has to be-
Yeah. So it's right here. Yeah. So
So
very.
whenever there's a rule change,
The thing is that Ryanair now is starting to
the thing
go
about
from
the
the
past,
main airport.
it's
Before it
a
went to
very
it was like a
long
2-hour.
process. So getting
You had to, from Stockholm Center, you had to take like a bus for 2 hours to get to the Ryanair
well,
airport.
is really to get
Yeah.
having
They have also flights repairs in Iran. Already have
Oh, cool. Stansted. Okay, with
But
Ryanair.
I would argue that
Are you there often?
these tools
No, well, I will go in March,
but they end up
after a period of 3 years.
affecting the environment.
Oh wow.
Because last year, my best friend.
And I may be kind of
But he didn't feel well,
more
so
consistent
Kirsten and I was here that I
issues
had
with healthcare for
Stand
health in the public
and
than
then,
that
yeah,
are
but now,
using. So there might be some things that are
Yeah.
not there. but you know, it's kind of a healthcare product. It's kind of a product, but it doesn't do it.
So yeah, well, then it's gonna be very good to come back.
Or maybe I'll just get digital entrepreneurship, for example.
Okay,
With
yeah.
the developers that helps, for example,
Yeah.
people measuring, I don't
Now
know,
that you want,
so you are now helping them with
Yeah,
the dietary
yeah.
habits or
Yeah, we were there.
Great. So let's do a healthcare app. It's kind of hard or keeping you in the great on one hand. You have to kind of show performance.
Sorry, I'm just gonna tell them.
You know, a lot of people go, oh, it's an app.
Right, 5 more minutes. 5 minutes.
So if you really look at the app development, so if you make a note,
Ice.
once you made that,
Yeah.
you can leave it for 10 years, it doesn't cost any energy. But keep it up. Take space, you know, but in essence, depending on what kind of environment you use, shouldn't take energy. If I store this now in the cloud, I'm continuously.
Do you remember a lot of it? No.
So if I then have to learn models, it takes a lot of energy. You know, that requires high levels of energy to calculate models and updating. So you're absolutely right. Within the digital space, there's also an accessibility that hasn't really been addressed, and people are not yet really interested. So in a very long way.
And what about the Biodesign? Is it like? Yeah.
Is there actually, it's a place developing now, that it's more clear for them. Is that
Exactly, it's very self-centered. So although, and it's a timeline. So, this product will help this person within a relatively short time, but maybe the amount of waste or issues it causes on the long term. Count the long term, so it's not that obvious yet. As we know,
maybe we can deal with it later.
exactly. Yes. So I think within that space, what would be really interesting is to say how
Permanent
do
here.
policies and regulations change. How do they need to match? So, okay, so the argument is there's been a lot of policy changes, regulations for AI and healthcare, how to deal with the data, adaptive algorithm, how to it totally ignores what the impact might be environmentally.
Okay. Is it more like tech push, like they already have a solution, or is it?
It's really interesting to see how people making everything massive amounts of data centers are required, cooling, energy, just the silicon, the generation of the chips, that manufacturing process will take a lot of energy. There's a chip shortage, so all of these kind of issues that come up. And in that credit, there's no real policy connection. At the moment, they are separated. And as you rightly say, people are, so there's an interest in working It isn't really being driven because I have to. It is, I can do that. And a lot of academics are interested in it. Yeah, we should do that in the future. But you cannot go.
Yeah, but it's like much more local life, you know, like everyone's like, it's getting really hype, and no one has a big hype case. It depends on the industry. So I think yesterday I read an article from some research that covered up that some investors are willing to invest even more in startups that can prove that they have, like, I don't know, like.
Yeah. I mean, it's a like it shows like there's a real track record for the methodology.
But it's not interesting. Workshop today, I can actually see that it depends on the industry. So it's not always the case to have different priorities.
Absolutely. So if you may be in packaging industry, you go, because I can see on the short term something that happen. But in the healthcare industry, maybe some investors say they do it, or there's something nice to have. So the investors want to make this, and they want to kind of keep it special for investing and return on capital. So if you go, okay, what are the risks? The risk is that the device doesn't work, doesn't perform well, or it's not safe. So if any of those happens...
Okay, so if everybody could take their seats, we will start diving into the the needs statements that you guys have come up with.
So unless there's something coming up, or
All right, take your seats.
then yes, probably now we think about it, because maybe in a year's time.
Okay, so let's kick off. Let's go around the room and see what needs statements you came up with. So maybe first, just tell us what the observation was, and then we. Oh, perfect. I will let you guys have your seats. But so for everybody, we're gonna go around the room to present our needs statements. Start with presenting your observation, and then what needs statement you came out of that, and then we can discuss in the group. You know what? Let's keep that up there. Okay, let's start in the back. The team in the back. Yeah, that's you guys. First of all, what was your observation that you based the needs statement on?
Yeah, so our observation was that medical professionals communicated with medical jargon, that leads to apparent miscommunication between the patient and the doctor.
Okay.
So, and then our needs statement was that we need a way to address the apparent miscommunication that occurs during the initial patient assessment between the doctor and the patient to provide more effective initial care.
Okay. So, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So a way to address the apparent miscommunication during the initial patient assessment between the doctor and the patient to provide more effective initial care.
Mm-hmm. Your colleagues in the room, what do you guys think about the needs statement? Any thoughts? Yes?
Maybe there might be a problem with like losing information.
Can you speak up?
You might you'd have to be careful not to lose information between the patient and the doctor if they're not using the jargon.
Right. So that some of the jargon might have a purpose. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you need to have the needs statement not kind of eliminate that. Yes. Yes.
It can be a commanding language, like it's not a kind of discussion between the doctors, but rather the order, the hierarchy. So it can be a gap sometimes.
Right. But any comments on the specific needs statements, or the specific needs statement that they presented? No. Okay. So.
How are you going to measure the outcome?
Right. So is the outcome measurable?
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the main issues we were thinking, although we haven't decided on an effective way to measure it.
Right. Yeah. So think about, because you said the first one was communication between
The initial.
the problem. What's the problem? What's the problem in your needs statement?
So the initial communication with medical professionals and patients.
Right.
The medical professional is just saying a lot of jargon to the patient.
Right.
Might not understand it, maybe physically anxious about it.
Right.
Kind of leads to a apparent miscommunication.
Right. So I would maybe also be a little bit more precise as to what kind of communication we're talking about. What kind of information is it? Verbal, written. What kind? And you said initial. Is it the first visit?
Yeah. So we were looking at the first point in the video.
Mhm.
The doctors verbally communicating with the patients.
Right. So here's a great point also, so great job. When you start to get more observations in, you might also want to think about. So you've targeted kind of the initial meeting, but the question becomes later: is that a valuable delineation of kind of a framework to work with? Like, does the initial meeting is that so different from subsequent meetings that you need to actually specify that it's the initial meeting? Right now, sure, this is what you've observed. You've only observed the initial meeting. But as you go on and get to know kind of the context a bit more, start making those judgment calls to not delineate or kind of just not go too narrow into, okay, we're only focusing on the first meeting. Maybe the problem persists in other meetings as well. It might look exactly the same. So those are just some things to keep in mind. But great job. Anything you wanted to add?
No, yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, keep thinking about the outcome. So also, if you have something that is subjective, kind of make sure that, again, against an investor, you have some kind of list, some scoring approach that they accept. If you say, oh, we need to improve communication, what does it mean? What is it, understanding, what does it mean? How do you measure it? And to the point as well, the same thing with the population. Is that for all clinical professions, or is there a subgroup that is more important? Or is it even for anybody, not even clinical professional, anybody that works in healthcare? So you can kind of go big and go smaller and see how it changes your problem. Essentially, if you can sell to a bigger population, always do. If your biggest population isn't your full market, okay, then you kind of go smaller.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so second group.
So we actually have the same or similar jargon.
Okay.
Observing the miscommunication between the patients and doctors. So our needs statement is a way to provide support to patients with insufficient medical contact that relieves confusion about tests and treatments.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any thoughts or comments on that? So one of my thoughts was that it's a different perspective. So you take the patient perspective, which is interesting because this also tells you that the same kind of I don't know if it was exactly the same observation, but it was a similar observation can lead to two very different need statements with kind of very different perspectives. We come back to the word support here, where, what do you mean by support?
Okay, so at start we were using the word information, so just providing information to them. But we were thinking whether this is too narrow of a path to relieve the confusion. Perhaps there's more aspects of how you can relieve confusion other than just giving information.
Right.
So, but we were still brainstorming on that.
Yeah.
So
no, but I
kind of took a further path.
Yeah, it's a great start, but be mindful of those kind of words. Support. Think of it, that's an action word in the need statement. So this is a little bit kind of next level, but think about the action word. Support is kind of a vaguer action word. We also need to be mindful of this is the first iteration of this need statement. So you've worked on it for 20 minutes. So if you had if you're working on it on your need statements for weeks, you will develop them more. So there's no criticism there, but your action word is kind of in the problem, and your action word is usually basically the verb in the problem. So is it support? That's a little bit vague. Monitor. That's a little bit solution oriented. Maybe diagnose. That's usually an action word that is more to the point. I'm not saying that you're supposed to use it now. I'm just saying that those action words can be something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, great job with that, and very interesting to have a different perspective. But I don't also think that your outcome, is it measurable?
Yeah, I think because our outcome is described as relieves confusion about tests and treatments, I think perhaps it's measurable just by taking a survey.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you feel confused after meeting?
Yeah. Okay. Next. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I just have a quick general question to these statements. Instead of saying what not to do,
Right.
better to say what to do actually.
Right.
Just for me, it was a bit confusing. So for relief, and sorry, could you just repeat the last one?
Relieves confusion about tests and treatments.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of maybe saying relieves confusion, saying actually what to do.
Yeah.
And not,
So what would the positive aspect of relieve confusion be?
Maybe, for example, increased clarification.
Yeah, or understanding. Yeah.
Understanding.
Yeah.
I think that's always easier to understand instead of saying what not to do.
Yeah, and it's one of the very common pitfalls as we had in the slide, it's a pitfall about focus on the negative instead of the positive. So instead of minimizing confusion, how about increasing understanding? So it's a great point. Yes.
Yeah. And again, I think great stuff in such a limited time. But another way to think about it is you could say, if there is confusion, what is the effect? Or if there's misunderstanding, do you see that they would call more? So you could then say, okay, well, I can measure quite easily the number of calls that I get from the patients. So then maybe the suggestion would be there would be a reduction in calls. Of course, you have to be careful because maybe if people are really confused, they don't call, and it's understandable. The problem is they do call. But you can see that you can then start to follow through and say, okay, well, maybe the effect of that is giving me something that is easier to measure, is potentially more relevant for maybe the person that would like to pay for your solution. In one case, with the understanding, it's kind of the benefit to the patient. But if you say, oh, it's a reduction of the number of calls you get into the clinic, or now it's the benefit to the clinic. So it's that framing as well to your customer almost. Although both of them might kind of try to do the same thing, those nuances really help you to identify the best possible solution.
Yeah, great point. Sorry, I'm just going to see. It just died on us. It wasn't. Okay, so moving to the next. Yeah. Yeah, system starting, so maybe that's it. Okay, so moving to the next team. Sorry, what was the observation?
Observation was all communication between doctors about patient conditions were verbal.
Okay.
And the statement is a way to improve the communication of the patient's medical history to hospital staff to reduce diagnosis time.
Mm-hmm. So any comments on that? Sorry? Big and broad. What? Any other comments? What do you mean by big and broad?
If you're reducing the diagnostic time, what's your baseline? How much do you want to reduce it by? Is it for certain specific conditions? Does it mean all patients with whatever condition?
Mm-hmm.
Walk-in, accident and emergency, chronic conditions?
Right. So how do you measure, how do you frame that, right? Any other comments or questions to the group? No, can you read it again?
A way to improve the communication of the patient's medical history to hospital staff to reduce diagnosis time.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I mean, your time to diagnosis is measurable. It might, yes?
We were just probably talking on similar lines, but we had a different problem which we're looking into. But a way you can improve upon is probably maybe have centralized software that gives up-to-date patient information when they're coming to the emergency. So the consultants already know the patient's information beforehand.
That's a solution. So this is a great point as well. So thank you for bringing that up. But it's very easy to jump to solutions and start talking about solutions, and that's also kind of a human thing to do. So I don't want to single you out or criticize, but this is something that we oftentimes do. We jump to solutions, but let's again focus on the need, where. Make sure that we understand the need to its core, before we start talking about some. I actually just wanted to bring that back. Is it showing behind? Yes, it is. So, really understanding the need before we start talking about the solution. Yes, any other comments? Yes?
So, delay in diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there are different departments, so where the sample is gone, what are the next steps? So a centralized system, like he said, and that is the software. So is the organization structure is aligned with the software that they bought it from somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
So, and training all the staff, not only the doctors, so everybody know like what are the next steps.
Right, but are you talking about solutions now?
So it was a problem and a
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah. So if we keep focusing on the problem, I think this is. So yeah, I do think that you can narrow it down, maybe frame it a little bit more. So what kind of context are you talking about specifically? Because it might be too broad just to say any type of diagnosis, but to say, okay, in this specific, when we talk about, we can the first real value we can provide is diagnosing, this specific skin condition. Then we can maybe start there or skin conditions in general, and we can start there as our first focus. Yes.
Yeah, and just to kind of, the reason for that is, whatever technology you build, when you go through regulations, if it is a medical technology, especially if you do diagnosing, so if you are supporting the diagnosis process, it's the intent that you have to prove. So it can be that there's a particular disease that is easier to prove, therefore you can kind of go through the regulations quicker than another disease. Although if it's just transferring information, it's not an open device, so you're kind of lucky, you can do any of it, but be aware of when you are setting those marks that you are kind of also picking the things that maybe has a big market, easier to go through regulations, less competition, so that's where you might have your case study initially, although you would like to kind of end up broader in the long term. So these are things to kind of think about. When you were talking about, to your point a little bit, what is the region? Are you looking at within a hospital? Are you looking at between hospital trusts? Are you looking at across the country? Are you looking at this between countries? So although there's not yet in the need statement, these are things that kind of come from your need statement that can help you understand, again, how big of a need am I solving and how is that represented in terms of that information provision.
Yeah. So let's maybe move a little bit quicker because we are running out of time, but we want to still have time for discussion. So, but would you guys mind going next?
So the problem which we are looking into is valuable emergency ward resources were wasted on misdiagnosing patients, which are probably not serious. And as you mentioned, I think the need which we were now looking into is a way to accurately diagnose the cause of chest pains in emergency wards.
Mm-hmm. Any comments on that? What's the outcome?
Well, the outcome would be that if we have a solution that can help us accurately diagnose the cause of chest pain, that would help in alleviating the consultants issue that they can see more patients in a stipulated amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the outcome?
Helping consultants reach out to more patients in a shorter duration of time.
So increase throughput of patients.
Yes.
Okay. Could there be other outcomes?
Proper diagnosis would help knowing where the patient has to be sent, which consultant has to be sent.
Mm-hmm. And what would that lead to?
Improving the patient health.
Yeah. So there might be different outcomes here, and as we talked about, there might be ands in there, but don't do the cheap thing and go with ands and ands and ands and do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to save costs, and we're going to improve health. Focus on one thing that you think is most important, and you made a decision there, and I think that's great. Make a decision about, okay, this is the outcome that we're working towards. This is what we're going to communicate around. This is what we're going to have as a team, as a focus point. So there might be different outcomes. This is a great example, but focus on one outcome. Anything else?
Yeah, sorry, this is way too interesting, so sorry for where we are with time, but when you think about the accuracy as well, think about what is the competitors in terms of accuracy, so how much better do you need to be? So this is something that you will see a lot when you're setting up the need statement. People go, 100%, we're going to diagnose all of it. Exactly, so that won't happen, but what is it? Do you need to be 80% or 70%? So at what level have you solved the need in such a way that you have created impact and that investors will be interested and that the stakeholders will kind of jump on it. And that can be very difficult to think about those percentages because they are important for you to set up your case.
Yeah. All right, next team. I don't know where who, is it, yeah, on this, like, who, are you all a team on that road? Okay, you're a little bit, okay. Okay, perfect.
So we observed a miscommunication problems between the doctors. Our approach is we suggest a way to address the communication gap between the doctors that we improve the accuracy and the efficiency of assigning doctors to serve the patients, especially in emergency situations.
Right.
So the way is to set up a department-wise management system that sort of manage doctors, so we don't really need an advisor or a head of doctors to manage them. We just need a system, we trust the system, so that everything can be perfect.
Right, but is that a solution?
Yeah, that is a solution. That's like...
Okay, so let's... So focusing on the problem, so what's the need statement, specifically?
I mentioned it.
Yeah, please, read it again. Yeah.
Communication gap between the doctors that improves the accuracy and efficiency of assigning doctors to serve the patients in emergency situations.
Right. Okay. So specific, your outcome is specific in this. You're talking about only emergency situations. You have an "and" in there. Think about what was it? Efficiency and accuracy. Yeah. Maybe there. Maybe that's one of those times where "ands" are acceptable. But it seems like also the problem is a little bit ill-defined. Can you read it, the problems? Miscommunication. So what is miscommunication, right? So again, support. What do we mean by support? What do we mean by miscommunication? What kind of communication? So you're being very specific in the outcome with the context. Maybe you can also move that into the problem or the population. I mean, what kind of populations are seen in that context? So those are good points, Jerome.
Oh yeah, exactly. With the picking of the "and," it's good if you can convince people, which is one thing. So that's the thing that you pick. You can have secondary outcomes. A lot of other things it can do. That's great. But for your need statement, what's the big thing that the single outcome? But if you just do that alone, people will be already interested. So that's how you think about which you want to take if you have an "and."
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Next group.
So I'm with this group.
Okay. So you're with them. Okay.
So I put my laptop on charge.
Okay. So who wants to read it?
I can read it if you want.
Okay.
So the observation you had was that people in corridors are blocking patient and doctor movement. The problem was overcrowding is causing delays for hospital patients in emergency care to start treatment. And the outcome we want to achieve is to reduce the amount of time between patients moving from wherever their initial condition is to treatment. Yeah.
So how would you read that as a need statement? A way to...
I'm not sure what the format was, but...
Sorry. Yeah, I can... a way to address problem in population, that outcome.
A way to address the overcrowding that is causing delays in hospital patients in emergency care, that reduces the amount of time between patients moving from their initial position to treatment.
So reducing time to treatment, basically? Yeah. So that's kind of what you're trying to get at with your outcome. Moving them is about getting them treated quicker. Yeah. Any comments on that? Yeah.
With the reducing, I don't know how you reduce time to treatment. This seems like something that would be quite difficult to solve. Whether that would be a...
Well, solving it, we don't have to worry about solving it now. But, yes? Oh, sorry. Yep.
I wasn't quite sure whether reducing the overcrowding could be the outcome, because the way you framed the issue was the overcrowding. So you might want to
Right. Interesting. So, what's the problem? What's the outcome here? And there, so very.
It's, probably because the outcome is more associated with the need than the problem itself. So what we're trying to get is, patients and doctors to be moving quicker in that environment, and the problem that's causing that is overcrowding.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Any comments?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it also means that if, depending on what your system is solving for directly, it could be that without overcrowding, you could still have doctors and healthcare persons move quicker through the system more efficiently. So then, when you take it out, does your system no longer work? When you put it in, does the system work? So you can kind of think a little bit about how important that particular part is of your need statement. And if you can take it out and say, well, to be honest, if everything kind of is run efficiently, we don't have overcrowding to begin with, so we kind of have the system running even without overcrowding, then that might be a kind of better need statement. But, it depends, because maybe it is the overcrowding that is causing the issue, and once you no longer have that, it's kind of steady state.
Right. I mean, it might be, the 5 whys, digging deeper. Why is it overcrowding? It was because process. Why is that process like that? Okay, why? So going down, down, down. Perfect. Thank you. Were you in which? You're in the same group. Okay. So we've covered all the groups in these 2 rows. Yes. Okay. So it's final group.
So we observed that a doctor was physically occupied with holding a pump to drain the lungs throughout the whole resuscitation process.
Mm-hmm.
And then our need statement is a way to eliminate the need for a resus team to hold the pump in place during chest compressions. Manually hold the pump.
Mm-hmm.
And we recognise this could be applied elsewhere.
Right. And what's the outcome?
So if you required 2 staff to do the process that we observed, the outcome would be 1 staff, or ideally something which required no staff.
Okay. In order to reduce staff.
Improve resource utilization.
Improve resource. I would say that this. Say if it's staff only, then I think you should keep it that way, not say resource allocation, because staff. I mean, it's the staff that you're getting at, right? So resources can be money, it can be time, it can be other assets. So yeah, I think that's a good.
I think staff is the right way.
Yeah. Any other questions, or sorry, any comments on that need statement? No, Jerome?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because this is a kind of a hard outcome. Either they are using it or not, and they have to hold it or not. So you do go between 2, 1, or 0. But yeah, I think this is an interesting one as well, as you mentioned, where you can start to see and observe. Do we see that the staff is also doing similar things where they have to hold equipment? How much can you generalize? How much can you, exactly. How much can you kind of broaden the need to create a bigger pool from the market?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very clear.
Yeah.
So we kept it to the resus team because that's what we don't.
Yeah, definitely.
Just, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So the key thing here is, because it is such an essential bit of work, the accountability for what your solution will be high.
Mm-hmm.
Just be aware that you have to really prove to the regulators that this is, at least as safe as the